This is Powis Castle, and this is the Clive Museum. Clive might ring a bell for some of you. Clive of India. His name was also given to him. I mean, have a look at this place. The treasury, the museum, is just around the corner in there, filled with stuff. I managed to get some sneaky videos so I can show you as I explain. But all of this, we can go back to the 1600s, sort of the formation of the East Indies Company. England and Britain was coming up with ways to start expanding trade. Spices, silks, textiles. The French and the Dutch were doing very well on their trading routes. And so we get these small little private companies like the East Indies Company, and there was a few others that just started off as these small, really small private companies. And it's sort of the beginning of shareholding investment. They have track records of like blacksmiths, you know, investing £20 into some of the voyages. So it's sort of the beginning and the formation of shareholding as we sort of know it today. So the very early 1600s, we have these private merchant companies start popping up and going on little side quests everywhere, all across the world. And this is in direct conflict, of course, with the French. So the British and the French rivalry go very far back. They had a few battles here and there. And the British East Indies Company, they land in India, in Bengal sort of area, and they set up a very good relationship with the Mughal Empire who was there. They were the wealthiest empire basically in the world. They were ridiculously rich. And they had incredible textiles like silks and all this sort of cool stuff, but they weren't that interested in sea travel and exporting the goods themselves. So the British East Indies Company, during the beginning, took control of the exports for them. They would buy all the stuff from the Mughals, and then they would send it around the world. Now this is where our story gets interesting. So the British East India Company form a good relationship with the Mughals. They're doing the exports. They're actually paying tax to the Mughal Emperor, the Mughal Empire, paying taxes to them because they set up forts in Calcutta and a few different trading posts around India. And it's all going pretty well for like 100 years or 120 years or so. And then a very interesting situation happened. This is where Clive comes into our picture. Early 1700s he was born, and he enlisted and became a soldier for the East Indies Company. And they actually had a bit of a war, a bit of a fight with the French. I can't remember where it was exactly, but they had some, I think it's called like the 7-Year War. If you're from here, if you're British, you might be able to know and drop some more information in the comments. I'm trying to just remember all this stuff off the top of my head. But yeah, a false piece of information gets sent that the French were preparing a massive naval fleet to go to, I believe it was India, because the French were also in India, and they were kind of fighting for control, the British and the French. So the British East Indies Company, and then also the Royal Navy, they sort of team up and make this huge, even bigger fleet, and they head over there to combat the French, who, it was actually a false document. The French were actually going to Canada, so nowhere near India. So there's Sam up there. So they basically rock up near India, and they're like, well, the French aren't even here, and we've sailed for months and months. So what should we do? Clive's on that ship as well, and Clive is like, well, my career is basically over. But then the Mughal Emperor at the time actually attacks Calcutta, the British fort, because the British weren't really paying the taxes they were supposed to be paying, and they kept expanding their fort, you know, this kind of stuff. And Clive uses that as justification for a pretty big retaliation. Takes back Calcutta, and there's a famous battle called the Battle of Plassey. And Clive actually destroys the emperor that he, was fighting against. I believe the British only had something like 3,000 troops against the Mughal emperor, who had like 50,000, which is insane. Famously, a massive monsoon came, and the Indian troops, all of their gunpowder got soaked. And they thought the same thing happened to the British, so they sort of went out in the open to attack them. But the 3,000 British troops still had working gunpowder, and they were able to just like unload a crazy round of artillery, and they defeated them. So then Clive basically marches into that guy's treasury, takes a ton of stuff, becomes ridiculously wealthy himself, and they take control of Bengal, the British East Indies Company. Just a small company who have now become ridiculously powerful, taking control of like the wealthiest, textile place in the world. So after the Battle of Plassey, Clive returns to Britain. He's sort of hailed as a bit of a hero. And then the British controlled areas in India go a bit chaotic over the next 10-15 years, and Clive is ordered to go back and sort of get control again. And this leads to a second battle. I think it's Buxar, B-U-X-A-R, the Battle of Buxar. So be it, Clive manages to defeat the Mughal emperor yet again, and this is the most significant moment in terms of Britain's wealth transfer from India to Britain. Clive, there's a painting in that treasury, which I will show you right now. He is getting signed over the Diwani from, I think it's Shah Alam. I'll pronounce that name super wrong, but the Mughal emperor is signing a document, giving it to Clive, which basically grants him the right to collect tax from the richest province in India, which is insane. So from a small company, a private company, they go from being a tiny little company to then a governing superpower of the wealthiest province in the world at that time. Insane. And Clive, after the Battle of Buxar, basically loots the treasury of the Mughal emperor at the time, helps himself to hundreds of millions of dollars worth of loot, brings it back to Britain, and some of that is here, right here in this castle, in the treasury, in the Clive Museum. And this is the Powis Castle. It's a bit confusing because there's two different things going on, but I believe his family, Clive's family, later married into the Powis family, continuing making a very powerful family. So you have Clive Museum filled with Indian loot, and then you have the Powis Castle. And he became insanely rich. Hundreds of millions of pounds worth of stuff brought back. And then that led to the British, the Industrial Revolution and everything. All of that sort of money flowed back into Britain and fueled everything. Crazy, man, crazy. This one dude, Clive, who managed to just start as a soldier, work his way up. And it's a very controversial place now because people talk about, they should give things back, they should do this, they should do that. But imagine telling Alexander the Great back in the day, oh mate, you should apologize for what you did. It's kind of how history goes. You get conquered. The better side defeats the not so good side. But yeah, of course, there's tons of stories in between this. There's massacres, famines, all that kind of stuff, right? As all colonizations go. But that is a brief summary for you of how fascinating this place is, how much wealth there is right here, and how this directly fueled Britain and basically built Britain and fueled the Industrial Revolution.